The morning sun threw these crazy long shadows across my field when I heard it, the sharp metallic snip-snap of wire cutters on steel clear as day through my kitchen window. At first I figured maybe the old fence was finally giving up after 30 years, but no, there was Margaret Whitfield, our HOA president, out there in her powder blue cardigan and matching pearls cutting through my fence like she was opening a ribbon at a shopping mall. And right behind her, an army of soccer moms and party planners started hauling folding tables and giant bags of decorations right onto my pasture, acting like they'd just discovered some hidden public park. Margaret turned to her clipboard-wielding assistant, flashed that triumphant country club smile, and goes, "See, I told you this space would be perfect for the community barbecue." She had no idea what was about to happen. Now, what Margaret hadn't noticed, maybe because she'd never actually paid attention to my danger bulls and pasture signs every 50 feet, was that my three prize bulls, Thor, Zeus, and Odin, were grazing just past the tree line. They're massive, smart, and well, they know when something's off. The second that fence came down, Thor, my big boy, 500 pounds of muscle, let out this deep, rolling bellow that echoed all the way to the main road. Margaret's face froze, and you could see that perfect plan of hers starting to crumble. Let me back up for a second. My name's Robert McKenna, and I've been running this patch of land in Cedar Grove for 3 decades. My folks bought it right after the war, back when the only neighbors were deer and the occasional lost hiker, long before Willowbrook Estates sprouted up like weeds and started trying to improve the countryside with pastel mailboxes and doggy waste stations. I used to be a rodeo trainer, spent 20 years working with bulls who could launch a grown man into next Tuesday. These days, it's just my 3 boys and a handful of show cattle, a simpler life, at least until Margaret got elected HOA president. You see, Margaret treats her little kingdom like she's some kind of suburban queen. You let your grass grow a quarter-inch too high. Violation. Hang a flag that's not pre-approved. That's a fine. Paint your front door beige instead of eggshell tan. You get the picture. But her real obsession is the annual Spring Spectacular, the kind of event where she books food trucks, bounce houses, even live music just to remind everyone who's in charge. 6 months ago, during one of her community improvement walks, she stopped by my front porch with her clipboard, all fake charm, and said, "Mr. McKenna, wouldn't it be wonderful for the children if they had access to such a lovely space for Easter egg hunts and movie nights?" I told her politely at first that it's a working ranch with dangerous animals, and that nobody, especially not kids, should be wandering around. She just waved me off and said, "Oh, I'm sure we'll figure something out. We're all neighbors here." That was her way of saying, "I'm not going to let this go." For months, she tried everything, sent the HOA lawyer to comb through property lines, drummed up petitions, even complained to the city that my bulls were a public nuisance. She lost every time, but instead of moving on, she got sneakier. So when she sent out a neighborhood-wide email promising a surprise venue for the block party, I should have known she was cooking up trouble. That morning, watching the parade of minivans pull up and party guests start staking out spots on my property, I felt my blood pressure spike. Kids ran wild through the grass where my bulls grazed. Parents set up canopies right next to the pond, and Margaret, looking like she'd just landed a spot on HGTV, soaked up every compliment about the beautiful location. I grabbed my phone ready to call 911, but just as I stepped outside, I heard it, not just the chaos, but the deep, steady drumbeat of hooves, Thor leading the way, Zeus and Odin right behind him, all 3 looking about as amused as you'd expect giant bulls to be when strangers invade their breakfast. The first person to see them was a young mom arranging glitter paint at a face painting station. She shrieked, "Bulls! Oh my God, there are bulls!" And just like that, the whole event turned to chaos. Grown men dove behind folding tables. Someone upended a popcorn cart and kids screamed as parents snatched them up and ran for the hole in the fence. Margaret just stood there, shell-shocked, muttering, "This can't be happening. I checked, there were no animals here yesterday." Like I moved them around for fun. I whistled 3 quick bursts, one long. "My bulls know that means stand down." They stopped immediately, all eyes on me. I walked right through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea, one hand on Thor's neck, scratching behind his ear, and said, "Good boys. Trained performance bulls, folks. They're not aggressive unless you give them a reason, which is why the fence is there." But Margaret, panicking, started shrieking, "Get them away! Somebody! Call animal control! These beasts are dangerous!" She startled Zeus, who pawed the dirt, and people tripped over chairs trying to get away. One of the food trucks spun its wheels in the mud, stuck for good. Through it all, I kept the bulls between me and the crowd using hand signals, just like we practiced for rodeos. But you try explaining that to 50 terrified suburbanites in matching t-shirts. Within minutes, you could hear the sirens first. Local police, then animal control, then, believe it or not, a news van. Officer Bradley, who's known me since I moved here, walked up with his hand on his holster and asked if I was okay. "Yeah, Jim," I said, "the boys are under control, but someone cut my fence and brought all these folks onto private property. My bulls were just being curious." Margaret found her voice again, pointed straight at me and said, "He did this on purpose. This is assault with a deadly weapon." I could have laughed if I wasn't so furious. Then animal control stepped in, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patricia Chen. She took one look at the bulls, saw how calm they were, and said, "These animals are beautifully trained. They're only protecting their handler. No signs of aggression." She turned to Margaret, dead serious. "Ma'am, did you cut this fence?" Margaret tried to spin it. "I was creating community access. The land should be shared, but Officer Bradley wasn't buying it. That's destruction of property and reckless endangerment. You led 50 people, including children, into a livestock pasture. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" He started writing citations. The panic faded as officers escorted people off the property. Some folks even stayed behind now that the coast was clear and asked to take photos with the bulls. Turns out Margaret had been planning this stunt for weeks. She told the HOA board it was all approved, charged venue fees to the neighbors, even used photos of my pasture in the party flyers without ever asking. If anyone had gotten hurt, Dr. Chen said, shaking her head, the lawsuits would have bankrupted the HOA. The news crew interviewed angry parents, one dad saying, "She told us this was safe. My kids could have been trampled." By noon, the only folks left in the field were law enforcement, Margaret and me. Margaret sat on an overturned table, the queen of a ruined kingdom, as Officer Bradley finished writing her up for destruction of property, trespassing, reckless endangerment, rattling off charges like he was reading a menu. The fence alone, $2,000. Emergency response, thousands more. "How much is all this going to cost?" Margaret asked, voice shaking. 15 to 20 grand minimum, Bradley said, and that's if Mr. McKenna doesn't file a civil suit. But the fallout didn't stop there. As we stood there, Margaret's phone buzzed nonstop. Word had spread through every neighborhood group chat. By that night, the HOA board called an emergency meeting, and within 3 days, Margaret was out unanimous vote. Gross negligence, misuse of funds, putting the whole neighborhood at risk. And it didn't end at her front door. Turns out Margaret was an event planner for a corporate firm in town, and the bulls at the barbecue story made the local news right along with her name. Her boss saw it. She was done. A week later, I bumped into Margaret at the grocery store. She looked small. No makeup, no pearls, just a shell of that woman who'd once run the block. She looked at me and whispered, $23,000. That's what it all cost. Legal fees, the fence, the fines, everything. Then she turned and left without another word. Honestly, I almost felt bad for her, almost. So yeah, that's life out here on the edge of suburbia, where a determined HOA president can try to turn your ranch into her personal party ground and get more than she bargained for. You'd think folks would learn to leave bulls and ranchers alone, but I guess that's just human nature, right? You know what I mean? Some people never get it until the consequences show up in their backyard. So what do you think? Was I wrong to stand my ground, or did Margaret get exactly what she deserved? I'd love to hear where you land on this drop. A comment, argue it out, because around here the drama's never really over.